Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Level Up Your Legacy podcast, where we aim to help you build the legacy you hope to leave one day at a time. My name is Paul McCosco, and this is Bill Cox, and we are both certified coaches with Bill Cox Coaching. And truly, we are excited to bring you into today's discussion on the subject of boundaries for leaders. It's a book written by psychologist and author Dr. Henry Cloud. And before we dive into that book, let's do a little bit of a check-in, Bill. Bill, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a beautiful day. Beautiful day here in northwestern PA. Loving it. Yeah,
I'll tell you,
sun is shining on a November afternoon, and you got to take those days and just fully enjoy them when you get them, because you never know what you're going to get in November. So just got back from walking my German Shepherd at lunchtime. So that was awesome.
and that's really funny because I literally just got back from walking my German Shepherd as well.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful day in Greenville, South Carolina. And I'll tell you what, I don't pay attention all the time to the little things that are happening all around me. And I'll tell you what, when I was stepping on the leaves and feeling that crunch and smelling like just the smells of fall, for some reason, like that just captured me more than normal today.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is the best.
Speaking of the best, what has been the best part about your week so far?
I think kind of the simple joys, being able to walk Merrick and have sunshine and warmth in November. Always getting to connect with our son, who's across the country in the military right now. So hanging out with him and chatting with him in the evenings is always fun for us. And then we started a new PBS chick flick series with my wife last night. Can't believe I'm admitting that, but no, it's pretty good. Takes a little while to get into it for both of us, I actually have to say. But yeah, I think we made it through the first episode, and we're kind of in it now. So,
what's the crux of this story? Can you give it away?
It's a female. It's like Miss Scarlet and Mr. Somebody. I forget what even the title is. She is her dad was a detective in London during an era where women were not allowed to do such things, but he raised her to be a good detective. Then her father passed away, and it's the story of her basically taking over her dad's, because she's really good at it. She's really, really good at it. Story of her taking over her dad's business and carving out a detective agency in an era where women were not, you weren't allowed to do such things, or were not treated with any level of respect to do such things. So yeah, it's good. It's a cool story.
Awesome. It sounds like a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's good stuff. How about you?
The best part about my week, my two boys are in the play A Christmas Carol at a local university.
Nice.
And I'll tell you what, my boys are 10 and 12 as of Monday. My oldest turned 12. And it's been crazy hanging out with a bunch of college students who are theater majors and two little boys who have never done anything like this in their life.
Dude, that's awesome.
But I've got a young Scrooge and I've got a tiny Tim, and I'll tell you what, they're bringing the energy, and I'm proud of them. And it's fun to watch them awesome, kind of out of an environment that they're used to and, being in, and kind of come into their own. So
very cool.
It's fantastic to start off our time together with something positive, because as brain research shows, a positive outlook or attitude, or even recalling something positive that's recently happened in your life, it expands your thinking, and it allows you to be more creative. It allows you to even think bigger. And today we're going to wrap our brains around a pretty big topic, the topic of boundaries. And, chapter 2 of this book that we started last week, Boundaries for Leaders. If you haven't picked it up yet, I'd encourage you to go and check it out. And chapter 2 is what we're going to process today. And it's called Ridiculously in Charge. Do you think of yourself as being ridiculously in charge?
Not always.
No, neither do I. You know what? And it's so easy to fall into a mindset that, we're a result of what has happened to us, that maybe we're even a victim of our circumstances.
Totally.
And what happens when we do that? We react instead of respond. We lose control. We can even lose hope that things will change. We lose sight of our future goals even. And we don't want
Yeah.
to do that as leaders, right? Because as leaders, we have a disproportionate effect on the people that we lead. So Cloud reminds us that as leaders, we get what we create and what we allow. I want to read a quote and we'll kind of process it together. He says, "What are boundaries? They are made up of two essential things: what you create and what you allow. A boundary is a property line. It defines where your property begins and ends. If you think about your home, on your property, you can define what is going to happen there and what is not. You are ridiculously in charge of the vision, the people you invite in, what the goals and purposes are going to be, what behavior is going to be allowed and what isn't. You build and allow the culture. It is all yours. You set the agenda and you make the rules, and you find there what you own. It is your creation or your allowances that have made it. Simply stated, the leader's boundaries define and shape what is going to be and what isn't." What a powerful statement, and what
Mhm.
a great mindset reframe. So
Mhm.
let's camp there for just a second. What the first half of that, what is it essential for a leader to create?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at that quote and you think about the idea of being ridiculously in charge, all of us are as human beings. You
Hmm.
know, one of the statements I always go back to in all of our classes and working with leaders is we are the cause of all our effects. We don't always like that statement, don't always want to fully own or swallow the truth of that statement, because sometimes we are victimized to a certain degree by circumstances, for sure. And I'm always sympathetic toward those situations when they arise. But ultimately, we're going to choose what we're going to do, how we're going to respond to those situations. So all of us, to some degree, are ridiculously in charge. It's just that we're not always conscious to that, or we don't want to own that, because with that comes responsibility, right?
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
my for my actions, and we don't always want to be responsible as people. But the truth is, and I think this is one of the great things about coaching, is that we are ridiculously in charge. We have agency as human beings. We have power. One of the things that we always tell clients at the beginning of a coaching engagement is you hold the power in this relationship. This coaching engagement will bring to you what you bring to this coaching engagement, and helping people understand that you have more agency than you give yourself credit for. Even the story that he tells of the whole ridiculously in charge came from a client that he was working with. And it kind of dawned on him at some point in their conversation, like, wow, when you think about it, I am ridiculously in charge. It's like he wasn't consciously
Just had
aware,
the aha moment.
yeah,
Like,
to the agency that he had. And then he realizes, like, man, I have a lot more power than I was giving myself credit for. And as leaders, it's even that much more agency. It's even that much more disproportionate levels of influence we have in the environments that we're in the teams that we lead, because we truly do kind of set the pace.
I love it. He lists out a few things. He says, we create the vision, the focus, the attention. The activities that create forward movement are defined by leaders. When we think about that as leaders, we set that tone for the entire organization. And that
Yeah.
power, we have to steward pretty well, because that's a pretty substantial amount of power to drive this bus forward. And oftentimes, I don't know that we fully embrace that.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it's such a great way of defining a boundary. Those things that we create and allow. Some things in leadership has to do with creating things that are necessary in order for the team or the organization to thrive. And some of those things, kind of going back to an Andy Stanley-ism, is the only do what only you can do. There are
Mm,
certain things that leaders are responsible to do in organizations and on teams that really only they can do. And they need to do those things. So like one of the things that Cloud mentioned was like setting vision for the organization. John Maxwell talks about the idea that leaders have a skill or capacity or innate ability or talent to see more and to see before other people see. And that's what makes them, one of the things that makes them effective at leading, because they can see things that other people can't see. And John always says, the question is, are you using that to your own advantage, that benefit, that knowledge to your advantage, or to the benefit of those that you lead? So like creating a vision for your team, that's your responsibility. And to own that seriously so that you can help people see a future that is appealing to them, that they see themselves in it, that they aspire toward, that draws them to want to be part of what you're trying to create. So that would be just like one simple example of those things that leaders create.
mhm,
Creating focus, strategic focus. As human beings, for all of us, our world is filled with way more inputs than we have the ability to process or manage or handle. And
mhm,
that happens all the time in organizations, that naturally things move from simple to more complex. Naturally, there are 1,000 things that people in an organization can give their attention to, and they will. And that's how so many organizations become unproductive and ineffective. It's why so many employees um, kind of get paralyzed at their jobs, because they like literally don't know what they're supposed to focus on. And one of the things
mhm,
that leaders create for them is strategic focus. Now they need to do that in such a way that the people they're creating that focus for can have ownership in
mhm,
identifying what's important. But at the end of the day, they need to take responsibility for shaping, refining, narrowing that strategic focus for the people that they lead. Conversely, like the other side of that definition, things that they allow, there's a lot of things that leaders need to choose to allow or not allow, right? Going back to what we talked about in our last session of the three executive functions of the brain: attending, which is more like that, creating, pay attention to this; inhibiting, don't pay attention to that. And so part of boundaries is saying no, we're not going to focus on that, we're not going to allow that, we're going to put a fence there, so that our energies can go here. And I kind of love both sides of that definition, both this protective, role, and the kind of the creational dynamic role
mm.
of
Yeah.
setting boundaries.
One of the quotes I love from this chapter, he said, the work of leaders is always twofold, just highlighting what you just said: to make sure positive conditions exist and rid the organization of the negative elements that stand in the way of high performance. And when I read a quote like that, I think a lot about culture, right? I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
onus of culture rests on the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And partially, I think that culture is determined by the boundaries, the personal boundaries a leader has set, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
modeling to the entire organization the tone that they want set. If they're calling people in the middle of the night, that's going to create a culture of we work all the time. Or
Mm-hmm.
if they have strong boundaries around their family time, that almost gives permission to the people that they lead to do the same.
Mm-hmm.
How much do you feel culture is impacted by a leader?
Well, what you just talked about made me think about a gentleman who guest facilitated in one of our leadership classes yesterday.
Hmm.
Um, and he'd gone through this course in the past, And he's done just a phenomenal job of really applying principles of leadership and going from an apprentice in this organization to where now he is overseeing 5 teams and has 60 employees and contractors under his leadership. And one of the things that he said to me, this is a perfect example of boundaries. He said, Bill, I find now that I used to be able to, like just calendar a week out. He said, but now he said, because I'm still lacking some managers on my team, I have to calendar appointments 3 weeks out now. Because one of the things that I make sure I do is block out time on my calendar to where I can just be productive and do really important tasks that I need to do in the mornings. And I pre-block those so that they won't get consumed with meetings with people, because if I didn't, that calendar time would get filled up and I wouldn't be able to do, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, the things that only I can do and that I'm responsible to do to lead that team effectively. And one of the things I said is that is awesome. And think about the people you're disappointing. We don't always think about that as leaders. If you're to do the right thing at times, you're going to disappoint people because you have limits. And that's what Patrick and I were talking about. In order for you to stay healthy, be the person you need to be, you have to set boundaries and create those limits, but you're going to disappoint people initially. However, I said, think about the example you're setting to people in your organization of what real leadership, healthy leadership looks like. So often people watch unhealthy examples of leaders who don't have boundaries, and they give off or project this idea that I'm not like the average person. I don't have limits. I'm superhuman,
Elon
And
Musk.
so, yeah, so then gosh, we could, yes, is he a high capacity individual? But he has also done some pretty crazy things that I think, well, I would definitely say are unhealthy, right? That has impacted his personal life, his family life, and certain employee relationships as well. But a lot of times leaders model a very unhealthy type of approach to your life. And because there is this dynamic to leadership that, Maxwell talks about, the law of the picture. People do what people see. People are watching your life, and a lot of times they're following your example. So you're teaching really bad habits for the people watching you. Whereas if you set those boundaries and you show people that, like, I have limits and there are things that are priorities that I have to attend to, that might mean that you get disappointed at times. You're teaching people a very realistic and healthy approach to life and leadership as well. And I think in the long run, people genuinely appreciate and respect that. And then you're creating the kind of rhythm to your life that is sustainable and that's healthy. And we need leaders that are healthy and in it for the long run, because unhealthy leaders make big messes.
Well, and what you're doing is you are modeling those executive functions, what to attend to,
That's right.
What's right in front of you, what you've calendared, what you've planned for to give your best energy and attention to. What
That's
you're
right.
inhibiting, you're pushing away all those other things that could be maybe good things, even maybe that meeting that would move the ball forward, but isn't the most important thing right now. You're modeling that it's okay to push those things off and to remember what you need to be doing, right? And what are you doing when you do all that? You're creating the ability for people to focus, right? Yeah. Focus is a gift. I love the story that Henry Cloud told about Steve Jobs, right? He had come back to Apple after Apple kind of had a downturn. And he tells this story. He said, after a few weeks, Jobs finally had enough. Stop, he shouted at one big product strategy session. He said, this is crazy. And he grabbed a magic marker. He padded to a whiteboard and drew a horizontal and a vertical line to make a 4-squared chart. Here's what we need, he continued. Atop of the 2 columns, he wrote consumer and pro. And he labeled the 2 rows desktop and portable. Their job, he said, was to make 4 great products, 1 for each quadrant. And then the room was in dumb silence. Sometimes the dust just needs to settle when you have clarity. Like that's a gift to be able to provide clarity. Let's talk for a little bit about the leader's power to bring clarity and focus to an organization.
Yeah, I mean, in full disclosure, Steve Jobs illustrations make me nervous, but
he's kind of like the Elon Musk thing, right? He's got some goods.
He's definitely an outlier, and that's a real mixed bag, but in that specific example, you can see the clarity that he brought, the needed clarity. That kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier. Leaders see more and they see before. And as much as it's important when you're helping your team identify what the strategic priorities are, as much as it's important to involve the team in that process, and it is very important to do so. If you want buy-in to the direction you're taking people, they need to feel like they own that direction as well. So there's a skill to that. And, parenthetically, if you're listening to this and you've never learned that skill set, that's why we exist as a company, to help you learn how to learn that skill set and how to guide your team through a process of identifying what's important, how to focus on that. So there's that. I mean, reach out to us. Let's have a conversation about that. As important as it is for teams to be involved in that process. At the end of the day, there's a point at which the leader needs to step in and say, given everything we've talked about, this is where we're going. And here's why. Okay. And that's really important. If you're treating people the right way, and we're going to get into this in the book, and you're creating environments where people feel safe, where people feel connected, where people feel valued, where people are in roles that reflect their strengths and they can connect their value to what the organization is trying to accomplish. And those are big ifs. If you're doing those things, there will be a time where they will want you to step in and declare that direction. They need you to do that. And that's your job. And that clarity is very powerful. There's great safety in that. And there's an increased sense of, I think, trust and confidence from your team toward you when you do that. And you have a track record of making good decisions and setting good direction.
I love that you said creating an environment where people feel safe and connected and valued. And that's a great place to stop, because that's where we're going to go next week. We're going to talk about creating an environment for the people that you lead to thrive under your leadership. So make sure you tune back in next week at the Level Up Your Legacy podcast. We'll be challenging one another again through setting boundaries and how to create those environments where those you lead can thrive. So we hope you'll come back and join us. And as we close today, I want to thank you again for tuning in. We record all of our podcasts and we send them out to our email list. So make sure that you visit billcoxcoaching.com and sign up for our email list if you haven't already done that. And if you found value in this podcast, forward it on to someone so they can be encouraged as well. And we want to thank you for just tuning into today's discussion. So until next time, this is Paul McCosco and Bill Cox saying so long for now on the Level Up Your Legacy podcast.
Bye, everybody.
Hey, thanks again for watching today's video. And before you go, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you go to billcoxcoaching.com, sign up for our regular newsletter to help you move from success to significance and lead your life in such a way that you live a legacy. Have a great day.